Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Kristen, one of the good doctors of Abbey Research. And here at Abbey Research, we believe deeply in empathy and in celebrating difference instead of papering over it, because we are really convinced that we can all live together in a more cohesive manner than we actually do. And one of the ways that we figure that out and work that out and teach that out is this series. It's called Welcome to My World, where I get the utter privilege of spending a little bit of time with someone who is different than me, everybody, who is good at things I'm not good at, everybody, about something that they have an expertise in, a training, an organization they run, a belief system they have. And you get to eavesdrop, essentially. And we all get to learn a little bit about somebody different and therefore learn a little bit more about the world that we inhabit. And today I am incredibly privileged to be joined by Tiffany Castagno, who is a transformative HR consultant. Oh my God, I love that phrasing. And curator of culture based in Pittsburgh. She is passionate about building teams, cultures, employer brands, communities, and partnerships. Her why is eliminating toxicity from workplaces and bringing psychological safety to the forefront of organizations. She believes that together is better. We do too. So this is a good match. She has a love for writing and is the co-author of a children's book called Can a Zebra Change Its Stripes that teaches kids about race. Tiffany, it is a privilege and an honor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Likewise. Thanks for having me today, Kristen.
I am so excited about this idea of transformative HR, and I'd love to start there. So for you, what does that phrase mean, and what does it look like in your practice?
Yeah, thank you for asking. For me, it's really moving the HR profession from transactional to transformational. And while that sounds, a little fluffy and all of those things, it really has been an evolution. And so even to take the name of my organization, it's actually an acronym for Cultivating the Evolution of Professional HR. And that is because we have moved from these times in the Industrial Revolution where now we're really looking at how do we best partner. So the role of the HR business partner has come about as well. And that's really because we want this proverbial seat at the table. We want to be able to influence. We want people to know that people are at the center of that. And that's frankly served me well in my career, knowing that I can execute on different things and that I can root cause it. And really, it's really digging beneath the surface and helping them discover all the limitless possibilities is how I see it.
I love that. I say a lot, I'm uncomfortable with HR if we're going to have HR that only protects the company, we should call it something besides HR. Because the misnomer is damaging to everybody, including HR professionals. It asks them to hold too many things. But really so much of HR these days is benefits management. That's really kind of what it is. But it doesn't have to be. And what you're talking about, I think, is what HR was supposed to be all along. And it just kind of got lost in some of the Department of Labor of it all, as it were. So what you're talking about hits me as not something that can be outsourced necessarily. Like it needs to be an embedded employee. Or do you think this is something where a company could come in and teach the folks how to do this there and then leave? Where's your position on that?
That's a great question. I think so. I am an HR consultant, so I am outsourced technically. But within that, the joy that I get in doing what I do is, and it was the same when I worked in organizations, is to empower my stakeholders, whether that's a client, an employee, even if I'm coaching one-on-one. There's not a whole lot of inherent benefit in me just dumping information out or proposing my own solutions. I love a good co-created process. And so whether that's me coming into the organization, me being seen as part of the organization, and I am with the leadership teams I work with, I think that there are things such as PEOs where they can help you, kind of manage some of your day-to-day HR functions, but ultimately it has to be embedded into strategy. So I think that there's opportunity to kind of do a blend of those things.
I love that you just corrected me about the idea of presence versus strategy, because I think that's really important. And I'm really, really glad that you use that word, because we think a lot still in business. I own a manufacturing company. and so co-own it with my brother, and who is on this channel, the very first video of this series, if you want to hear more about what Brian and I do on a day-to-day basis besides make fun of each other. But one of the things that we see a lot when we interact with our like manufacturing colleagues and our kind of businessy colleagues is that there's still this idea that being present is what's important in terms of like physical bodies. And there's not as much of an idea, like if you're in the building, you're a part of the decision, which all of us who know humans know isn't the case. You can be in the building for 100 years and still never be part of the strategy. And you could be there for 10 minutes and be part of the strategy and the culture. So really what it sounds like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you are talking about empowering intentionality around the humans that these people are working with. Is that fair?
That is so beautifully stated. That was art right there. Thank you.
Good, because I think when I'm listening to you talk, and I read some of your websites that I'll be putting below, and when my niece is the right age, she'll be getting your book, because I'm really intrigued by it. What I feel from you is a real spirit of intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there has to be. I'm so glad you called that out, because there has to be intentionality, and that is something that I talk to my clients all the time about, in their own work and in my work. And here's how we're best going to work together. Everything we do has to be by design. And it's not to make it prescriptive, but it's where are you at now? So there's a framework I work through with them. Where are you now? Where are you trying to go? And where are the gaps that I can help you and support you, guide you in between? And that's where all this beautiful empowerment comes from. And where, as an HR consultant, I get to help fill in those gaps, and I get to help empower them and figure things out that they may not have even seen coming around the corner.
Man, and like in business, we are obsessed with talking about strategies and goals, and yet we often talk so hard about KPIs and ROIs that we don't include like the human matter in our strategy. So I'm really excited about this. And I'm really curious to a little bit, I don't want you to give away the farm as it were, but like, how do you do it? How do you get these folks that have thought an old way for so long? Kind of what are the first steps towards shifting their thinking?
It's really getting them to understand that it's business, right? So at the end of the day, there has to be an ROI. I can't just come in all magical, sprinkle, fairy dust with unicorns and be like, yay, look what we're going to do. Absolutely.
People are great. Yeah, we can't kindergarten. We can't treat CEOs like they're in kindergarten as much as they behave like they are sometimes.
Right. And the thing, I just had this conversation the other day, is as much as I would love to do that, because it's kind of how I'm wired, it's my personality, that doesn't show them the business case for it, right? And so as much as sometimes I feel like we fight against, like, well, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to constantly prove? There has to be, everybody's in business to turn a profit, to, support a cause, to do something. And so there has to be something in that for them. And that's what I get to do every day. I get to say, here's what you're trying to work on, and here's the beauty of it. For me, you have to be open. You have to be open to possibilities. And we as humans are wired to know what's in it for me. What am I going to get out of this? And am I going to get to do it my way? Because we naturally think that our way is the best way, or it's maybe the way that we're most familiar with. So it's also stretching outside of your comfort zones. And I do push my clients a bit to say, is there another way of thinking about it? So there's a lot of coaching that goes on as well, but we have to be open to it. We have to want to see things differently. We have to be willing to pull in other stakeholders. Who are those other people? Get the right people around the table and be inclusive. And that, I feel like, is a good, solid foundation. And the rest you can work on. That openness and willingness to collaborate. You have to have that and stretch outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, I love that. I frequently say, I cannot teach you to care about other people, but I can teach you how to.
Yes.
And the first willingness, like the holiest thing is in interactions, is understanding that like you don't know what you're doing, but you really want to.
Yes.
And that I'm hoping that as we move out into the next phase of COVID, because I'm just not sure that's ever going to end in some ways, as we move into this next phase of reshaping, what I'm hoping is that we can hold each other a little bit closer in a way, each other's humanity closer in a way. I mean, there's so much research coming out. We work with a really great statistician down at Charleston Southern University, and she looks at the role of AI in business. And one of the things that she's seeing consistently in her research is that the way for people to be competitive, employees to get better jobs, is to have the soft skills of empathy and inclusivity and to understand humans, because that's the actual competitive advantage moving forward. You can outsource like a lot of stuff to robots, but you can't outsource the competitive advantage of knowing how to be a human.
I love that.
And that is what, like, no matter how many innovations we have made in AI, no matter how far we're going, and I talked to somebody else on this channel who teaches empathy to AI, and she's done that for most of her career. And she's like, humans are still better. They're always going to be better. And she said, but like, if I can get an AI that's going to answer your distress call from AAA at 2:00 in the morning to have a little bit more empathy, I've done my job. But you're still going to want to talk to a human at some point. And it's just, but that means that those of us who want to stay in these conversations have to cultivate empathy and inclusivity and be aware of who's at the table. And it sounds like that is your sweet spot, which I'm excited about, because we're in good hands if you're the one talking about it. But I know the barriers I see in my work to these conversations, and I'm curious what are the ones in yours? What keeps, in your mind and in your practice or in your experience, what kind of keeps this from happening?
It's a lot of it is the antithesis of what I shared we should be doing, right? So I don't want to, so many times I've seen, and I'm blessed not to have this with my clients. They're very, very open and they trust me. And I thank you all. You're wonderful. And I am, the struggle becomes the status quo. And that's why I talk a lot about shaking it up, disrupting it, being transformative, because we can't do things the way we've always done it and expect to continue to have that competitive advantage that you spoke of. And so we have to be willing to move the needle on different things. We have to be willing to be agile, to explore, to be flexible. And if we're not able to do that, then we're not going to be stronger. And there's a lot of comfort in remaining the same, because we know these things, whether it's implementation of a new system or practice, or maybe not in the interest of inclusivity, of not hearing that employee's perspective that's different. And so that holds a lot of people back. And sometimes it's staying within our own little bubble in our organization or in our department, and not, operating we're operating in silos and not seeking information externally and getting that new information in, which is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking back to a conversation I had one of the last times in the before times, one of the last times I was in a room full of people. And it was with with a faith-based nonprofit who was trying very hard to wrestle with the idea of holding their conservative theological viewpoints and also inclusivity of LGBTQ folks. And the very earnest, I mean, like, the guy was crying almost because he's trying to square this circle. He's in his 60s, trying to square this circle in his mind, was, if I let them at the table, do I have to do what they tell me? And I wonder if that's the unanswered question, the unasked question in so many things. Is, so like, when we talk about, like, we want people at the table, I wonder how many people here we want to give people control. And that's not what we're saying. We're saying that other opinions and voices and options have to be present so that you consider them. But we're not saying you have to give control of people who's potentially the antithesis of your organization. You maybe just need to hear them out. And you're nodding. Does that resonate with you? Like,
yes, I feel like my head is like,
yeah, like a bobblehead. Like, yeah, I totally get that. There's been so much you're saying, and I'm like, yeah, like, don't break your neck nodding.
Tell me more. This is what it is, I think. And even in the HR profession, I have seen it so much, and you have to build a relationship with people first so that they trust you. And so I've seen people resist, like, oh, all the other HR people, what's going to be different about you? And or they think that you are there to just give them the solution. And so they resist a bit when you try to like coax it out of them and have
they
them
just want the program that all their other friends have bought, that they can just work the program and it'll be fixed. And you're introducing work instead.
Yeah. Or they think that you are there to take the control, and that they're going to lose control, that you're going to introduce too much bureaucracy, or things are going to become problematic, they're going to be stagnant, they're going to slow down. And that's not always the case either. It's providing insights in a different way to look at things, because although we have evolved, there is, and although people first, there is still a large component of HR existing. And some people don't like to hear this, because we do have to protect the organization and we do have to mitigate risk. That is a large, deny it if you want, whether you're HR or not HR, that is a large function in a critical one. That is cost savings. We're not just overhead.
Yeah. And the things, so I do a lot of HR functions for our company, and the conversations that I have with folks all the time is, I have social work training, so I come into it with the people side and not any sort of HR legalist SHRM training. I learn all that on the fly and through Google. I don't always get it. And we're so tiny that so often the stuff that is like the really complicated problems are what enter when you're 50 people and above in the United States. And we're below that. So we have a little bit more wiggle room, which is interesting. But what I always try to remind my friends who are not in leadership and organization is that every single American statute cuts both ways. So the EEOC is fantastic and damaging, and so is the Department of Labor, and so is payroll law, and so is unemployment taxes, and so is everything. And so you have to have people who can hold people and an organization in tension. And that's the true function of an HR person, is to be the person that can listen and say, you're right, that's crap, and a system needs to change, or I'm so sorry to tell you, what you want is never going to happen, because it can't. And so, and here's all the reasons it can't. And that skill set is, my God, it's a gold mine once you find it. I think that is a unicorn. Like, folks that can do that are unicorns, but it's hard, and it requires the kind of stuff that you're talking about, to really think about humans as whole entities and not in just the people that show up 8 to 5 every day.
Yeah, I've had that conversation about 5 times this week, including twice yesterday.
Oh yeah. Like, do you realize that they're also married and they have stress at home? Or do you also realize that people do abuse the EEOC system as much as it does protect against other stuff? Like,
yes. So it can't just be this or that.
No.
You have to, there's so much gray. And that's the other thing that holds people back and becomes a barrier, is that they are comfortable over here. It's finite. It makes sense. It is all these things. And when you get in that gray area, it's like, whoa, hold on now. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, Angela Duckworth talks about the fact that a lot of leaders actually love to have decisions taken from them. And they love to be able to blame, because they're so overwhelmed with decisions all the time, that they love to, she was talking about this on a podcast with Brene Brown that I listened to last week, and was essentially saying that everybody at some point wants to not be special and not be in charge. And so leaning on systems is the easiest way to do that. Like, oh, I can't do that because the rules say that I can't do that. It's not that you are like a lazy or terrible person. It's that something has to give, and you're happy to do that. And we do it subconsciously, but you don't actually, even if you're in charge, you don't actually want to be in charge of everything. You don't want every single decision. You would like some to just be made for you. And that's where some of our reliance on institutional systems comes from. And I found that really, really fascinating. And it's the people that can still work with the systems that have the grit that she very famously talks about. She's the one that wrote the book called Grit. But I loved that idea, because, oh my God, the best gift anyone can give me in my day-to-day life is to make a decision for me. So I don't have to.
Fatigue is a real thing. It is a real thing.
It's so real. Like, when I get home and my husband's like, what do you want for dinner? And I'm like, I want food, and I want it to be edible. And that is as far as I want it to go. Like,
yeah. And maybe that's why we hear in HR and in organizations, why we hear people say, well, that's just how it has to be this way, because HR has to be that way. These are the policies. I can't do anything about it. They don't have to make a decision.
because, oh my God, please don't make me unearth the thing that we've been doing for 30 years just because somebody made a complaint about a racial slur. Please don't make me unearth how we've been doing this because it was a harmless joke that a guy made about a transgender person. Please don't make me do this. And you and your colleagues and us here, we have to step in and say, A, it's not harmless. And B, it means that the system wasn't working. And so we do need a new one, and it's going to be work. And we're both sorry and excited for you. So kind of like, let's go.
Roll up your sleeves.
Yeah.
Go time.
In terms of, as I bring this up now, because I wanted you specifically bring up race in your bio. And so I want to talk about just for a couple minutes about the barrier, like the biggest challenges to the workplace in terms of human cohesion. From somebody who's not in an HR specific space, I would say the summer of 2020 and the murder of George Floyd is a stumbling block for a lot of organizations, at least in like pearl clutching or fear that they don't know what to do or they don't know what's going on within within your professional world. Is that true?
It is true. And it's the reason, in fact, that I started a weekly virtual DEI series, because and that evolved from just two friends checking in on each other. We're pandemic friends. It's how we met. Just saying, how are you doing after this horrific murder? How are you doing? And as we continued our conversation, because of the nature of the work we do and the adjacency of both, we said, people probably aren't having these conversations in organizations. Employees probably don't know how to approach their leadership about it. And so it really was born out of, these are difficult conversations. And I've watched organizations just like start the meeting. We haven't honored even a tiny sliver of space for the fact that someone may have been crying before they came to work. They may have been crying at work. These are difficult things that impact the humans that come to work for you.
Yeah. So what is that? Has that changed? I mean, like, it's obviously changed your practice. So let me just say, how has it changed your practice that this is out in the open in a way?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I think it gives your audience a great opportunity to think about it and to hear, because again, sometimes we demonize things, and it's not that people are inherently bad or that they want to do the right thing, that they set their intention for that. It's more that they just don't know, or they don't know where to start. They feel ill-equipped. Fear is a huge component. And so I see that a lot, because people don't know where to start and they're afraid to say the wrong thing. What if this person's not ready? We have to meet people where they're at on their journey. And I think that that's been the hard part for a lot of people. I think that for me, it's starting to ask questions. And in the general sense, we often forget about diversity of thought because we get so focused on race and things. And so I just try to introduce new ideas, new ways of thinking, but also to just check in on my clients. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Introducing self-care for them. And how's your team doing in the midst of a pandemic with everything going on? It's asking simple questions and also infusing some of those thought processes in the work that I'm doing with them to help them explore and think about these things, because it has to be embedded in everything. That's how you shift culture. That's how you create inclusive cultures and teams.
Yeah, we are huge believers in diversity of thought, and it's why we talk so much about intersectionality. And I'm so glad you called it out as well, that if we just keep focusing on DEI from this binary of black and white, or this binary, because very often when America says race, we do leave out other populations of color in the conversation. And so the more we focus on the binary, the less we can focus on the humans. And I love this idea that part of diversity work, part of inclusive work, part of inclusion work is to also check in on the human being themselves. I absolutely adore that. I'm so glad you said that, because I think it's probably something I would think about subconsciously, but not be intentional with it. So I'm really glad you've called me on that.
No, thank you for bringing that forward. And I think we've had this theme of intention during our conversation.
Yeah, I love it.
I love it. And I think, we have to set our intentions for that. And I think that it was a recognition within myself that, I could be doing more in this space. How do I help bring my clients on this journey? And some of them are great. They're at varying stages of it. Some of them are already embedded in the community. Some of them have anti-racist policies and things going on, and they seek out and we specifically talk about it. Sometimes we don't talk about it in those terms, but we're talking about it. And so getting those conversations out in the open is where it's at.
Oh, I love it. We're talking about it, but we're not using those terms. And so also connecting some dots. I do that with people in my parents' generation a lot, especially. Like where I'm just like, okay, I know that you think you're not doing this, but let me show all these examples of how you actually are already. And let's just like shift your thinking just really, really quickly. It's fun because language is so evolutionary. That the way people thought about themselves in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is different than they are now. And so people who are in varying generations are always going to use words differently to their emotions, viewpoints, and feelings. And so, yeah, giving kind of using the language of the moment so people can connect past and future with present, I think is really, really important. I love that point. Oh, I love it. Mm-hmm. I could keep this going for approximately 42 years, but in honor of both our time and the listeners' time, I'm going to hit pause here, but we're definitely going to have you back, and we're definitely going to figure out a way to do more work together. The viewers who have never met me before, hello, I'm based in Philadelphia, but Dr. Aaron, the other good doctor, is based in Pittsburgh, where Tiffany is. So don't be surprised if Tiffany and our mutual friend, Mary Jane McCullough, pop up on this channel a lot more as we all try to figure out how to lead all of our communities in a different level of inclusivity. So Tiffany, it has been a blessing and an honor. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, likewise. Thank you. I could have this conversation for 42 years too.
Yeah. So if you want to join us, maybe we'll do like one of those really long, terrible YouTubes that's like 2 hours and yet people still listen. And I'm one of those people. So like, I'll just like, I'm there with popcorn as people are just like talking about their day for 2 hours. I don't understand parasocial relationships, but I love them. So all that to be said, if you loved this video as much as Tiffany and I loved making it, please hit that thumbs up button. It really, really does help. If you like the conversation we're having, good news, we have about 10 videos a week that have this conversation with different words and different languages attached to it. So please subscribe so that you don't miss a single thing. And we'll see you whenever we see you around the Abby Research YouTube channel. Thanks again to my guest, Tiffany, and I'll see you all next time on Welcome to My World.
All right.